I'm Brian Jennings, and I'm here with Nancy Moskowitz, and we will be talking about some of our most anticipated books for the second half of 2022 today. Nancy's going to cover the fiction, and then I'm going to talk about a few nonfiction books, and we'll also share some of the newer books that are out that we're currently reading or that we've recently read. So, thank you everybody for joining us on this beautiful Friday afternoon to
Okay.
talk about books. New fiction, Nancy.
Okay. Well, I have some covers of some new fiction that's coming out. There are so many books that are published every year, and we are only aware of a tiny fraction of them. And out of those, we want to present you with some of the ones that we think you would be interested in, and hope that you'll be excited about these new books coming out as we are. So let's get started with the first slide. Um, The first book I want to talk about is The House Across the Lake by Riley Sager, which is coming out on June 21st. This book is for fans of The Woman on the Train, or I'm sorry, The Woman in the Window, Girl on the Train. It tells the story of a recently bereaved widow who moves to her lakefront cottage where she spies a beautiful couple who are nearby, and she starts to get friendly with them, and she finds out that they are hiding some really ugly secrets. So if you like these kinds of domestic thriller books, I think that this book is really for you. So looking forward to that one. Okay, next we
Okay,
have,
just pointing
oh,
out we're doing these chronologically.
oh, yes, that's
This
true.
one is going to be out soon here later in June.
Right. Okay, next we have Armored by Mark Greaney. It's coming out July 5th. You may be aware of Mark Greaney. He's written some of the Tom Clancy books. This one promises to be one of those books that you just can't stop reading. If you like these kinds of nonstop thrill books like Tom Clancy, this book is something that you will enjoy. So we're looking forward to that one. All right, next we have The It Girl by Ruth Ware, coming out July 12th. Ruth Ware is one of my favorite authors. She never disappoints. This book sounds really excellent. It takes place in Oxford University. Hannah and her friends are a close-knit group of friends, and one of them is murdered. When they find the culprit, he is convicted and put in prison where he dies. About 10 years later, a reporter comes to see Hannah and says he doesn't believe the person who was convicted is the person who did it. So this causes everyone to sort of look at each other and say, if he didn't do it, then it must be one of this close circle of friends. So this is something that I think everybody who likes Ruth Ware is not going to be disappointed by this one. She looks really good. Okay, next, We Lie Here by Rachel Housel Hall. She's probably not that familiar. This book's coming out in July 12th. She's one of those authors that's kind of up and coming, and she's in this case, there's a woman who is forced to hold an anniversary party for her parents. And when she goes back home to do that, she gets these insistent text messages from her mother's friends saying, I have information that's going to change your life. You must meet with me. So before that can happen, the friend is killed. And so Yara is the character's name. She has to put these clues together and figure out what it is that she's going to change her life. So this one should be a good one. If you haven't read her, you could start with some of her earlier books, but they're all standalone, so it doesn't matter. Okay, next, Portrait of an Unknown Woman by Daniel Silva. That's coming out July 19th. You may be aware that Daniel Silva presents us with a new book every July. He's like a clock. This one, he returns with Gabriel Allan, his character, who has kind of retired from spy work and is living in Venice with his beautiful family. But because he's an art expert, he's asked to get involved in the provenance of a 17th century painting. And so he is drawn back into the very surprisingly dirty and dangerous world of art theft. So this one is sure to be a great read, and I'm sure everyone's looking forward to the new Daniel Silva. Okay, next we have The Last to Vanish by Megan Miranda. This is coming out July 26th. Some of you may have read some of her books before. She's also another up and coming. In this one, there's a little town in North Carolina that's got beautiful views, hiking trails, and an astonishing number of people that disappear from this town every year. So a reporter comes to investigate the town's kind of dubious claim to fame, and of course he disappears. So the protagonist of the book is forced to try to figure out what's going on. So this should be a really good one. Looking forward to this one as well. Next, we have Yesterday's Spy by Tom Bradby. That's coming out August 2nd. And for those of you who kind of missed those British espionage books, the John le Carré, Len Deighton, Tom Bradby is he's firmly in that tradition. In this book, there's a gentleman who's kind of become a drunk, and he's asked to get involved in a mission when his son, who has been writing articles impugning the Tehran government in Iran, and he is forced to find his son who has disappeared. This takes place in 1953, and it should be a good old-fashioned spy thriller for those who like those kinds of books. Okay, next, The Last White Man by Mohsin Hamid is coming out August 2nd. Now, if you read The Reluctant Fundamentalist or Exit West, then you're familiar with this author. This has a very intriguing premise. A man wakes up one day to discover that his skin has darkened overnight, and he's shocked by this, and he tries to hide so that no one will see him, but it starts to happen to other people too. And how people react to their outward appearance being changed. Are they going to embrace this as a new rebirth, or are they going to stubbornly pretend it's not happening? So I think this book has such an intriguing premise, and I think it's one of those books that makes you think about what would you do in this situation. So I'm really looking forward to this one as well. Okay, next we have Mercury Pictures Presents by Anthony Mara, coming out August 2nd. You may remember him from his big book, which was The Constellations of Vital Phenomena. It came out in 2013, and he subsequently wrote a book of short stories. This book, instead of depicting the war-torn scenes of the last book, takes place in Hollywood, in the golden age of Hollywood. It focuses on a character named Maria who has fled Italy for political reasons, starts her career as a typist in a third-rate movie studio, works her way up to producer. And there's a lot of humor in this book, the way people are depicted, but there's also a very serious undercurrent about fascism, and I think this is a very complex story that will appeal to people who like literary fiction with a little meat in it, and some of it being a little dessert of funny parts. So I'm looking forward to seeing how he pulls this one off. Next, we have The Family Remains by Lisa Jewell, August 9th. Now, this book is billed as a standalone sequel, which means you don't have to have read the earlier book, which was The Family Upstairs, to enjoy this book, but it's actually kind of the same characters. So if you like that book, you're going to love this one. And I would say that Lisa Jewell has really come into her own the last few years. She's probably the queen of domestic thrillers. So this one should be excellent. I'm looking forward to this one as well. All right.
I didn't know there was going to be a coronation.
Yes, she's during the British royal family. Yes, we're anointing her. I've anointed her queen of domestic thrillers. Okay. Oh, Jamie Ford. The Many Daughters of Afon Moy by Jamie Ford. That's coming out August 2nd. And maybe a lot of you have read The Hotel at the Corner of Bitter and Sweet, which is a very much loved book, very popular with book clubs. In this book, Jamie Ford is he's the great grandson of a Chinese immigrant who changed their last name to Ford, which I think caused Jamie Ford a lot of confusion because no one expected him to be a Chinese descent with a name like Jamie Ford. In this book, he uses his own family background of the immigrants in his family and the descendants to talk about this character named Dorothy Moy, who is a poet. And when her daughter's starting to have some serious difficulties in life, she decides to go back to her female ancestry to try and discover what happened to them and why things are the way they are. Why are things still being felt in the present? This book sounds really good. I think it has some magical realism in it, and it's really probably one of the most anticipated books of the summer. And I hope everyone who liked Jamie Ford will give this one a try as well. Or if you haven't, okay, Haven by Emma Donoghue is coming out August 23rd. She has really the most wonderful imagination. Her books are all so different. And this one has a very intriguing premise. Four men, it's a priest, a scholar, and two monks. And it sounds like a beginning of a joke, but it isn't. Decide to leave and look for a new place to put a monastery. So they take a tiny little boat into the Atlantic Ocean, and they find this little uninhabited island which only has birds on it, and they decide to claim it for God and put in a little monastery. Now, the book is described as having not a lot of action but a lot of conflict. So I think this book really sounds very wonderful, and I hope you will put that on your to be read list because it's on mine. All right, next. Oh, okay. My Government Means to Kill Me by Rashid Newson. Now, when I first saw this title, I thought they meant maybe a government of another country, but they're talking about the United States government. This is a debut novel that actually has a lot of, in the publishing world, there's quite a buzz with this. It's about a 17-year-old teenager named Trey who leaves his home in Indiana to come to New York in 1985. He is looking to find a place where he belongs, and although it's unfamiliar, because he's a gay teenager and he's thrust right into New York, which had a very vibrant gay scene. AIDS was going on, and he does try and find himself a place where he belongs. Even if this may sound like it might be outside your comfort zone, I think reading about other people's experiences always builds empathy and understanding for other experiences in life. So I would certainly give this one a try. This sounds really wonderful. All right. Next we have, there it is. Carrie Soto is Back by Taylor Jenkins Reid, and that's coming August 30th. She's probably familiar to those who've read The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, Malibu Rising, and I can't remember the other one. Daisy Taylor and the Six. I think that Daisy Taylor and the Six. This one sounds really interesting. Carrie Soto is a tennis champion, and she's broken every record. She's devoted her whole life to tennis. She retires at 31 at the top of her game, and 6 years later, she finds that there's a young athlete who's up and coming, who threatens to eclipse her accomplishments. So she decides after 6 years, she's going to get out of retirement, put herself back in training, get herself back up there, and reclaim and defeat this challenger. And I think the story of somebody taking on a challenge like that, an epic struggle to get herself back in shape, it sounds a very exciting book. And since her other books have been, did I tell you, it was Daisy Jones and the Six, and Malibu Rising, and The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. Those are the three other ones she wrote. Sorry to mess that up. Okay, so try this one as well. Put that on your list. Should be excellent. Okay, The Marriage Portrait by Maggie O'Farrell is coming out on September 6th. She's the author of Hamnet, which was the story of Shakespeare's young son who died at an early age. In this book, it's the story of a young woman who is a member of the Medici family, and she's a very unimportant member. She's a third daughter, so she's very happy just to be left to her own devices. When her elder sister, who's engaged to a very powerful man, dies on the eve of her wedding, they just substitute Lucretia, and she's supposed to marry him now. So, of course, she has nothing to say about it. So she goes along with it. She moves into his house. She knows she has to give him an heir, and she cannot pursue any of the things that give her joy, such as art. So what this story does is it's a true story, and it really just talks about her life. And if you're anyone out there is a Robert Browning fan, and there may be one or two of you, there's a famous poem called My Last Duchess, and that refers to Lucretia. Uh, and it also occurred to me that had this been just a historical fiction, it would undoubtedly have a happy ending where she would fall in love with her husband. He would allow her to have a room to paint. But because it's based on truth, and truth is always sadder than fiction. So this sounds like it's going to be a really good book, especially if you like historical literary fiction. Okay, next we have, oh, this is Brian. So go ahead, Brian.
Oh, I enjoyed Jonathan Ames' first book called A Man Named Doll. Not his first book that he ever wrote, but he's turning this into a series of books by this private investigator. It's an ex cop Vietnam vet who's kind of damaged goods. So he's dealing with his own problems while at the same time trying to solve cases for other people. And Ames was the creator of the HBO series Bored to Death. So if you like that, you might enjoy uh, The Wheel of Doll. You might want to start first with A Man Named Doll. It's not clear to me whether you probably don't have to read the one before the other one because it's not a cliffhanger, but you may want to if you still have time because it's not out till September 6th.
And we do have that one in the library. Okay, we have Next in Line by Jeffrey Archer, September 27th. This is the fifth in the series of William Warwick, who's the chief inspector in London. This book takes place in 1988, and William Warwick's squad has to investigate the Royal Protection Command, which protects the royal family. And in 1988, the most popular member of the family was Diana, Princess of Wales. And so they have to find out if something going on that's going to endanger not only the royal family, but everything in England. And being a big Princess Diana fan myself, I'm anxious to read this one. Okay, and Jeffrey Archer has a big following. People just love his stuff, deservedly so. Okay, this book, Mad Honey by Jodi Picoult and Jennifer Finney Boylan, is coming out October 4th. I was surprised to see that Jodi Picoult had a co-author because she has written some young adult novels with her daughter, Samantha Van Leer. But she, as far as I know, she hadn't written any fiction with another author. This book sounds really good because it's got all the ingredients for a good thriller. It's got a double narrative. It's two families who are tied together by tragedy. There's a murder, and it goes back and forth between the narratives. And if you're not familiar with Jennifer Finney Boylan, she writes a lot of like op-ed pieces for the New York Times. She was also a professor of literature. And also, she has written some very good novels. So the two of them together should be really dynamite. And I would recommend this one. I read a little snippet of it. It sucked me in right away. All right. Next, Lucy by the Sea by Elizabeth Strout. It's coming out September 30th, 2022. She has written a book not too long ago called Oh, William. Lucy Barton, who is the main character of this book, is a recurring character. And in this book, Lucy, it's the early days of COVID, and Lucy and her ex-husband, William, who is a little bit more fragile than she is, she takes him to her little house in Maine to get away from, as many people fled the city during the early days of COVID. because it's remote, and they figured they would be safer. While they're there, they have a lot of memories, painful memories, sweet memories that kind of bring them to a new understanding. And I'm so glad that Elizabeth Stroud came out with this book so promptly, because I think when you read a book where there's a recurring character, there's so much richness to it. There's so much, you can see the growth, and you really feel like you know these characters because they're just not a one-off book, but a series. So this one also I'm looking forward to. She won the Pulitzer Prize for Olive Kitteridge, so you know that she's a good writer. Okay. Oh, The Maze by Nelson DeMille, October 11th. This book has been very puzzling to me, like a maze, because it was supposed to come out in June of 2021 and had no cover when I looked at it, and it kept being pushed back. In fact, Brian and I, this was in our webinar from last year because we thought it was coming out in June, and it for some reason, and I tried to find out why, I couldn't. Anyway, this is a John Corey novel. Retired Detective John Corey spends a lot of time sitting on his porch. He's nothing to do. When he's asked to participate in actually what is a real unsolved crime, which is the bodies that were buried in Gilgo Beach in Long Island, they found at least 9 prostitutes buried there, and there is yet to be a solution. So John Corey is asked to come in and help with the investigation. And knowing John Corey, he probably figures it out. But in real life, it hasn't been figured out. So let's hope nothing derails this book from coming out October 11th. But I'm fairly sure it will be out. Okay. The Last Chairlift by John Irving is coming out October 18th. It's been 7 years since he's come out with a book, and he is getting up there in age. This one tells the story of a woman who is a slalom skier, and she's very talented. But an unexpected, now this takes place in 1941, because of an unexpected pregnancy. Guess what? She has to give up her dreams. She moves east and becomes a ski instructor. Her son, Adam, has always asked her about her story, and she refuses to talk about it. So he decides to go back to where he was conceived in Colorado and try to find some answers. And what's really wonderful about this book, it's part love story, part ghost story, is as a man, he is not afraid to discuss the ugliness of sexual politics and inequality. He himself is angry about the way women were treated. So, and also I think, look at the cover. It's just so evocative. It's so kind of eerie and lonely. So whoever,
I like John Irving. I like him.
yeah, yeah, John Irving, and I think he's kind of been forgotten because he doesn't come out with a lot of books, but he really is one of our finest novelists. So this is something to really look forward to. Okay. Oh, Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver is coming out October 18th. Does that, if that title reminds you of another one, it's not a coincidence. Demon Copperhead is a young man, a boy who was born to a single mother in a very, very poor Appalachian hovel. And like his better known counterpart, David Copperfield, as a poor child, he has a really tough road. And what Barbara Kingsolver is doing is she's sort of saying that David Copperfield had a really tough road. He was an orphan. He was poor, and even in today's United States, people who are born in unfortunate circumstances have a really almost insurmountable challenges. And so there is that comparison. Although I don't think it's explicitly made between, I don't think David Copperfield is mentioned in this book, but if you haven't read David Copperfield, you might want to go back and read it and then see that really for poor people, things haven't changed all that much. Okay. You can see it says no image available. Well, because there's no cover. 14 Days by Margaret Atwood and Others is coming out November 1st. And I think this is going to be one of those great reads. It's got a wonderful premise. During the early days of COVID, there's a tenement in New York City where people are hunkering down. They're miserable in their isolation. They don't know their neighbors because it's New York City. So they have the idea to go up on the roof and talk and tell stories. And what's wonderful about this book is that there's so many different authors that have contributed to this endeavor. We have Tommy Orange, Celeste Ng, John Grisham, Emma Donahue, and others. And I think this is almost like an Arabian Nights type of thing where there's just an entertaining story from a different voice. So this is probably one of the ones I'm most looking forward to reading. Okay. And okay, Secluded Cabin Sleep 6 by Lisa Unger. It is a little blurry of a cover. We decided it's supposed to look kind of eerie. I love the title because it says it all. Three couples decide they need a little getaway, so they rent this luxurious cabin. And while they're there, what they expected to have a good time, it's really not. It's kind of like a locked room thriller where bad things are happening, and there's a very limited number of suspects. So it's kind of, kind of a nail biter. So this is coming out November 8th. Okay, I think we're coming to the end. A Dangerous Business by Jane Smiley, Pulitzer Prize winner. It's coming out December 6th. This is a historical novel. It takes place in Monterey in 1851 during the California Gold Rush. And Eliza's husband was killed in a knife fight. And ever since, she turned to one of the only jobs she can do to support herself, which is working in a brothel. And she's doing pretty well. And what happens is some young women, their bodies are being found all over town. So Eliza's a big fan of Edgar Allan Poe, taking as her inspiration the detective Dupin. She decides to solve these crimes herself. And it sounds like, if you like a historical mystery with a literary bent to it, this sounds like a lot of fun. So looking forward to this one. It's out December 6th. And I think that's all. Now, as I said, this is just a tiny, tiny fraction. Every time I'd see a review, I'd say, I got to put that in. And if we put in everything we wanted to, this would be days long. So this is just a very tiny smattering of what's coming out. But these are the ones that sounded like a lot of fun. Okay, so the new fiction books we've been reading. The first one on the left, it's got a beautiful cover, is I think it's called Miss Marple. And I'm reading it as an e-galley, and it's 12 short stories featuring Miss Marple by Agatha Christie. Every story is written by a different mystery writer, and it's a real, it's a lovely concept, and I'm really enjoying it. I haven't read them all, and the nice thing about short stories, if one doesn't grab you, you just forget about it and start another one. But I'm liking it so far. Love Marriage by Monica Ellie. I just finished this week, and I really enjoyed this book. If you've read Brick Lane, which I read years ago, there's something she writes about, very character-driven novels, but there's some humor in them and something that makes them feel real. In this book, just briefly, it's two families in England, in London. One is an immigrant family from India. They're Muslim, and their daughter becomes engaged to a fellow doctor who's English. It has a very unusual family, but they're more typically Anglo-Saxon. And the book really delves into the lives of the people in the families and how they get along, their cultures. And it's done with such heart, such love. And what I really liked about this book is that she doesn't go for an easy answer. She really doesn't. It seems more real than fictional. So I really enjoyed this book. I heartily recommend it to people who like character-driven novels. And then finally, the book One Day I Shall Astonish the World by Nina Stibbe. She wrote Love, Nina. This is the first book by her I've read, and I just started it, so I'm not sure. But so far, I really like it because it's, again, character-driven, which is my favorite kind of book. It tells the story of two friends who they've been friends for over 30 years, and one of them starts questioning her life choices. So we're going back in her time of when they first met, and it's a very rich book. There's a lot to it. It's got a lot of humor in it, and I'm really enjoying this one also. So that's what I'm reading at the moment or have just read. So I don't like to have too many books going at once because it does confuse me. But this is what I've got now. Okay. The next, all right, this is odd. It's when to know when to give up on a book. So it's three simple steps. Take your age, subtract it from 100, and that's how many pages you should give it before giving up. Now, the reason I threw this in here is because when I was trying to figure out what to put on for the slide of what I've read, I realized I had started and rejected a lot of books. And that was something I never used to do. I used to feel I made the commitment to this book, I had to stick with it like a bad marriage. And now I feel like I don't want to do that. Reading is a pleasure, it should be a pleasure. If you don't like a book, you don't have to use this formula, but this is really, I'm just giving you the tools to stop reading a book you don't like. And I used to have a little saying on my bulletin board in the old library. It said, "Life is too short to read books you don't enjoy." So that's just my little lesson right now. Okay.
Thanks for that.
Yeah, it's important.
New nonfiction. Here's a few covers before we get into it. The Last Resort, a chronicle of paradise, profit, and peril at the beach by Sarah Stoldala. The New York Times had this, I think, in their summer reading section, and I think it deserves a nomination for best cover of the summer.
Oh, beautiful.
A nice cover. It caught my eye because they recommended it to people who enjoyed the HBO series White Lotus, which is kind of a dark comedy that takes place at a resort in Hawaii. And I kind of take it as this is kind of the true story behind that dark comedy in a nonfiction book about what's happening. So if you liked White Lotus, that's a good book. Or if you like books to judge books by their cover, I'd say this one highly. This one, I didn't have any books for July, and I was reading Publishers Weekly, and this cover was quite strange, and it caught my eye. And this woman, Sonia Mauve Sessi, and I don't know if I'm saying that right, was the personal assistant to Conan O'Brien, and this is her book. And I think Publishers Weekly said if you like raunchy reads that have a lot of heart, this is a good book. So looks like it might be funny. The Fisherman and the Dragon: Fear, Greed, and the Fight for Justice on the Gulf Coast. Like a book with a subtitle that's a mouthful. A lot of different things going on in here. It's kind of like a nonfiction thriller. There's murder, but it also deals with environmental racism and immigration. So a lot of different social issues merging in a thrilling book. 19 Reservoirs: On Their Creation and the Promise of Water for New York City by Lucy Sant. This deals with the reservoirs west of the Hudson, not in Rockland, but in Sullivan, Ulster, Delaware, that supply the water for New York City, and also with the communities that were changed, the villages that were changed or lost as a result of the creation of those reservoirs to supply water to the city. So that sounded like a really interesting read. The author previously wrote the book Low Life about characters on the Lower East Side. So that one caught my eye. Surrender: 40 Songs, One Story by Bono. Bono, of course, is the lead singer For U2, the 40 songs refers to each chapter of the book. It is a memoir, but each chapter of the book takes for its title a song by U2. So if you like U2, um, look for that November 1st. Great
Mm.
True Books, A Year of Reading Briefly. So this is a nonfiction book, but about um, fiction, well, maybe some nonfiction too, by Kenneth C. Davis, who I believe wrote the book. Don't know much about history,
Mhm.
uh, and so you see some of the authors and the books. Books about books always rate highly for me. So November 22nd for that. The Forever Witness: How DNA and Genealogy Solved the Cold Case Double Murder. I love true crime, love genealogy. So those two come together with Edward Hume's book, Forever Witness. So I'm looking forward to that on November 29th. And finally, new nonfiction books that I've been reading. Um, just finished last week, right when it came out, A Lynching at Port Jervis. So you don't necessarily think of lynchings as something that happened in the North. You think of it mostly as a Southern phenomenon. Philip Dre, historian, though, has written a book about a lynching that took place in Port Jervis in the 1890s, not too far from us in Orange County. And it's a very, very interesting read. Um, I'm going to skip ahead here. Well, now I have the book here with me, African Founders by David Hackett Fisher. This was on my books I was looking forward to, but it just came out, and I just read the introduction. I just read the review in the New York Times, and David Hackett Fisher wrote Albion Seed, which was about
Mm.
the English. The subtitle was Four English Folkways in America. So now what he's trying to do is he's trying to take that same way of doing history and applying it to African Americans. And he's very systematic in the way he writes, and he takes each section of the country and has a little section in there where he includes notable African Americans and notable African American history. Um, he indicates that he went to Africa to do research for this as well. Um, the It's a little bit controversial in the sense that what Hackett Fisher's he's doing is in the introduction. He's really what he's saying um, is he's giving historiography, and what he's saying is more recently historians have essentially taken a negative view, and he's trying to say is I don't take a positive or a negative view of things. I simply research the history and then tell the story. So he's trying to be what fair and balanced, I guess, like a good historian would be. Um, of course, the issue with that is we all bring our own biases into it. So, in a way, I kind of consider this something that could perhaps be a reference book. Uh, a lot of the books, since we're in a smaller location, we've been leasing. I consider a book like David Hackett Fisher. This is a book that you buy for the library and you want to keep it for a long time because it has a lot of research in it. So just starting to get into it, and we'll see if I can get to the number of pages I need to before I give up. It's like one of the what's the book? The Power Broker by Robert Moses. Everyone jokes, everyone has it on their shelf, but no one's read it, sort of. But he is very readable for what he is. But it's definitely a doorstop. Now the other one, Rogues by Patrick Radden Keefe. I was lucky enough to get a copy of this on NetGalley prior to publication, and it's a great book. It's a compilation of his stories that he's written for the New Yorker, uh, and he often has been writing about crime in a sense, and so a lot of these characters he writes about, or people who um, are rebels. The last chapter was on Anthony Bourdain, and it was just really sad, um, but good, but good too. And anytime Patrick Radden Keefe comes out with a book, to me, it's a must read.
Mhm.
I think Nancy feels the same
Yes,
way.
I do. Uh, and we just wanted to mention about a program that we have called Automatically Yours, which you would sign up and automatically get put on reserve for select popular authors. Forms are available at the library, but you can also find them online under if you go to How Do I Put Holds on Books, we mention it. It's for New City and West Nyack patrons only. You select 10 authors, and then as soon as we know the book is on order, Teresa will put you on hold for it. So this way you don't miss anything. So that's something I would encourage you to do if you, unless you're an inveterate reader of Publishers Weekly and Library Journal. Otherwise, you might not know.
It's
Okay.
just for fiction, though,
Oh yes, yes, that's true. It's just fiction.
and
Um,
only select authors.
Select. Yes, I should have highlighted that. Yes, not everybody. But we picked people who are the most popular, who are still writing. We took off people who died, even though some of them are still writing. But yeah. So it's a good source for you if you can't possibly keep up with everything that's coming out. And the other one I want to mention is See What's New. If you go to newcitylibrary.org, which is a tab. Oh, do you want to show them? Okay, so it says How Do I, and if you scroll down to See What's New, which is the second selection there, click on that, and then it'll give you what's latest in different things, audiobooks, audiobooks, playways. We should take that off. But I just posted this. Every Friday I post the following Tuesday's releases because books almost always drop on Tuesdays, except for James Patterson. And so these are books that we've ordered. They may not be in the library, but you can click on the picture of the title or the cover, and you can go. It'll take you to the catalog. You can put it on hold. And so that's what's currently coming out in different things, nonfiction, large print. But there's also, I do have a selection for forthcoming favorites, which every month I post what's coming out 6 months out. So there's no annotation, but at least it gives you an idea of what's coming out. So you might put it on your list or go into the catalog and see if you can put it on hold. So this is the way that we want to keep you apprised of what's coming out, because that's part of what we do, and it's something that we want to encourage. And see, sometimes the dates, I just saw one, the 14 days. Sometimes the dates are wrong because they do change dates. I had to throw something out of my ordering cart because I saw it's not coming out to 2023, and we can't order more than 6 months in advance. So anyway, this is those are two good things: Automatically Yours and the See What's New, just so you can keep, because obviously if you're watching our webinar, you're interested in seeing what's coming out. And I only do it for fiction, so I'm sorry, Brian. There's no new unless it's something really important. I don't put nonfiction on there. Okay.
And then finally, we just wanted to point out that next month we're going to have Veronica Reynolds, who's our head of community relations, and she's going to talk to us about the adult summer reading program. We're going to be doing a bookmark that's a punch card, and she'll have more details about that, prizes and whatnot you can get for reading books. Who knew?
Yeah.
And hopefully she'll also be able to tell us a little bit about the new podcast the library's doing. Under e-library, New City Library on YouTube, there is a link on YouTube to one of to the first one. But if you have Spotify podcasts or Apple podcasts, it's called I Missed Book Club. So I think if you probably just searched for, and they have the first one here, where they're talking about Nancy Pearl's Four Doors to Reading. I know that Nancy really enjoys that.
Well,
Nancy
that's
Moskowitz
yeah.
enjoys Nancy Pearl's Four Doors to Reading.
I listened to this podcast and I couldn't believe that it was two of our librarians doing it. They could have been on NPR. They were so good, so knowledgeable. They have such an easy conversation. You just really give this a try because they're really good and they deserve to have a huge audience. And they have so much stuff to impart to you. It's just wonderful. It's something that libraries, are really starting to take off. We're getting to people in ways we never thought possible. So please give this a try. It's really good.